Hello, it's me again. I'm wearing a jacket. I haven't worn a jacket for ages. I just mentioned this because I've just been to a PCC meeting, and one of the things I wanted to say in that PCC meeting is thank you to everybody, particularly to some people who's helped with COVID 19, the arrangements we've had to make, the different things we've had to do. I want to say a big thank you to Jane Carr and Sue Blanche and others as well. Um, because lots of people have done so much, and I think it's just important to recognise that. So thank you very much, and yeah, we've got to get used to sort of doing things that you need to wear jackets for. So I thought we might also sort of update you as well about sort of church and what's going on. So services are happening as usual. It's not a lot of other things aren't because actually kind of moving to sort of refreshments and all that sort of things quite difficult. But we'll get there. We'll get there. Don't worry. We're working on it. But at the moment, so we're getting back used to worshipping together, which is great. Now we're keeping live streaming as well, so it's a kind of mixed economy. And but in terms of services in church, we're having at well at Welland St Mary's 8 and 9:30 parish Eucharist, and that throughout the team, really all the usual services, including midweek services. Probably any things that are missing, the 40-minute service, which is just working out how to do that, perhaps from September, and then the evening services, because it would have been the summer evening songs, and that's about sort of lots of singing and socializing, which we can't really do. So that's where we are with kind of what's going on. Thought might just sort of talk you through about what we're doing as well in those services. I mean, most of them, if you come, will kind of take you through the service, so you notice things are different. We don't share the peace. There's no wine. I won't say anything when I give you the bread in the Eucharist. We ask you to take the service books home with you so that you're not they don't get picked up by somebody else later in the day. So most of those things you'll just kind of see happen. But the other things, just to say, is when you come, I mean, it's quite good if you bring your own hand sanitizer, but if not, all the churches have hand sanitizer in them. If you want to wear a face mask, that's fine. At the moment, you don't have to, but that may change. We can't sing at the moment. You've probably picked that up, even if you've just been watching a live stream, and that's probably going to be for a while. And then in terms of seating, we're trying as best we can to maintain social distance. So at most churches, that's just working it out with the size of the building. Welwyn, we're a bit more prescriptive. If you come to Welwyn at 8 o'clock, we ask you to sit socially distanced as fairly small numbers then. But if you come at 9:30, we ask you to sit where there is an order of service, and we've spaced those so that you're always 2 meters from another order of service. We have put some sort of couples, and we could put a couple of family pews. Now we can't tell exactly, of course, how many people comes in twos or threes or fours. So we've got a kind of way that we can be a bit flexible. But basically the rule is you sit where there's an order of service, and then you will be 2 meters from anybody who isn't in your bubble. Do come along if you want to. We also have a kind of contingency for overflow as well. But also, if you don't feel right coming, if you're shielding, or you're with somebody who's vulnerable, then do sort of continue with the sort of internet live streaming stuff as well. Then if it's not right for you to come, that's fine as well. As I say, it's a bit of a mixed economy at the moment. But for this week, I do want to just talk about, just because it's always good to have a bit of thought, isn't it? I want to just talk about a particular way of thinking that I read an article about and then sort of came across as to relating a couple of things that have been going round. And let's start by, saying I think English is the only language in which we have the expression, the person is too clever by half. I certainly know the French don't have that phrase. And I wonder what it means. I mean, that you should be too clever, that it's, a bad thing to be clever. What it usually means, of course, is that actually you're not very good at something else. Perhaps you're not very practical, or you're not very, you're a bit head in the clouds, so therefore you're not very good at sort of relationships or something else. It can mean a variety of things, but it's an interesting phrase. And the reason I say it is because it's an example of a phrase in which you have the form of, it's not A, it's B. I'll give you some examples of that. But sometimes it's not a terribly helpful way of thinking. So I'll give you an example. I was once sort of looking about appointing somebody to a parish nowhere around here. And somebody said, well, I think the trouble with that candidate is they're too academic. And I thought, well, what does that mean? We don't want our clergy to study or read books or have any qualifications. I mean, actually, I kind of knew what they meant, which was not they're too academic. I mean, they were academic, but the point was they weren't good at other stuff. And that's what the person should have said. Not, they're too academic, but actually the other stuff which we need them to be good at so they can be effective as a parish priest here, they're not actually good at that. And that's why we're not going to appoint them. So I thought it was important, in the kind of feedback thing, not to say, oh, we're not appointing you because you're too academic. I mean, it'd be ridiculous, but to say, actually, the reason we're not appointing you is because X, Y, and Z. And I've been thinking about this because I think sometimes we've been thinking a bit like this, both in the nation and the church. And I'll give you my two examples of this. So one of the sound bites we've got with churches is the church is people, not buildings, which is in a way right. I know exactly what you mean, and of course that's right. And of course the important thing about the church is a body of people. But that doesn't mean we can forget about buildings entirely. The two are not disconnected. That's the point. If you've got people, generally they want to be indoors and they want to be nice indoors where they can worship in a place that's meant something to them and they can meet their friends, etc. So you're going to have to care for the building as well. So it's not a question of either or. It's the kind of, of course people are the priority. And one of the ways we show their priority is by looking after the building they meet in. Another example of it in the sort of present climate is sometimes you get the things, which again, I know what people mean when they say it, but it's lives, not livelihoods. And I know exactly what people mean, that, we're not looking to make a fast buck. We're looking to take the measures that save people's lives. But again, of course, the two things aren't disconnected. Livelihoods are things that also are to do with sort of health and well-being. People living in poor countries have very bad life expectancy. If we don't get the economy going, there'll be no way we can pay for National Health Service to make sure that people are kept well. Now, there is a question of priorities that I fully get, but the point I'm trying to make is these things aren't unconnected. They're not mutually exclusive, and it's like those exam questions where get things. The causes of the First World War were not economic; they were political. Well, actually, they're a bit of both, and the good person will kind of answer in that way. So it's just a bit of a reflection on the way we sometimes think about things. There are exceptions to that, and that is if the things are mutually exclusive. So another thing I'm kind of thinking about is how we reward those who've worked on the front line, particularly in the health services. Now, I don't know about you. I'm very uncomfortable about saying, as part of the sort of economic recovery package, thank you very much for all you've done. We're going to give you a 2-year pay freeze. I mean, that seems in the nation a really ungrateful thing to do to those people, particularly working in healthcare services. But of course, once you say that, then you have to sort of say, well, if we're going to sort of increase the wages at least in line with inflation or whatever, then, there are only so many options. I mean, economically raising taxes or increasing government borrowing. Now, that's a kind of political economic decision that I'm wise as a clergyman to stay out of. But the point is, in that case, they are related. And so when I see sort of things on Facebook, particularly these memes that go around, the one I don't see is, let's increase the government deficit, or let's all pay 2% more income tax to make sure that, people, particularly at the front line of the caring services, get a good deal. Now, I will stick my neck out at that point and say, actually, yeah, I think, at least in the medium term, I'll vote for a tax rise. Now, that may not get me many votes or many likes or elected or whatever the heights of it, but I think it has to be. So yeah, so it's just these things slightly going around in my head in lockdown about how we think about things, about what things are related, where it's a kind of, it is an either or, you can do one thing or another, and whereas actually it's an either both. And I've seen, as I say, 2 or 3 times of these sort of logical puzzles come up, and people perhaps rushing to conclusions that actually they don't need to rush to, and perhaps take a bit more time just to think about whether either, we need to do one thing or whether actually we could do both things. Thanks.